In an aging, quiet America, it's not the silence that hurts the most. It's when you realize no one notices that you've gone silent at all. In America, over 50 million older adults now live alone. But the most terrifying part of solitude is not being alone. It's feeling like you're no longer needed when no one asks anymore. How are you, Mom? You doing okay, Dad? Grandpa? Do you want me to stop by today? You start to wonder, do I even exist in anyone's life anymore? Today Bond doesn't bring you statistics, not a chart, not a headline. Today Bond brings you a story. The story of a mother who was once the center of her entire family, who used to get 5 phone calls a day. Now she doesn't get called at all. Not because anyone hates her, but because she's no longer needed. A 27-second call. Friday afternoon, 4:12 p.m. Agnes Miller, 78, looked at the clock. It was the exact time her son usually got off work. She made 2 cups of tea, one for herself, one for him out of habit. She sat neatly, fixed her collar, smoothed her hair. She had already planned what she'd say. A stray cat came into the garden yesterday. She made that beet soup he used to love. The neighbor passed away. The funeral was quiet. She dialed his number. It rang. I'm in a meeting, Mom. Can you not call me all the time? Click. No hello, no checking back in, no follow-up later. Just 27 seconds. But what silenced her wasn't the abrupt ending. It was the silence that came after when he didn't call back. That night, she sat alone in her old recliner by the window, the same chair she once rocked her grandson to sleep in. It still creaked every time she leaned back, as if it too missed being used more often. She looked outside. Kitchen light on, water heater humming, the wind soft. Everything was the same, except inside her something broke, without a sound. She whispered to herself, maybe I've disappeared. At this age, you don't hope for anything new. You just want to keep a few old things, a familiar voice, a simple question, a thank you. But when no one needs you anymore, you start erasing your own name from the world quietly. Agnes didn't blame her son. She knew he was busy. He had a wife, kids, a job. That's life, she understood. But understanding doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Because even when you understand, you still feel yourself falling off the list of those who once called you Mom every single day. She didn't call back the next day, not out of anger, but out of fear. Fear of bothering him, fear of hearing reluctance in his voice, fear of realizing she really had become a burden. She began to write. Not a journal, not poetry. She started a quiet notebook. In it, each line was something she wished she could share but no longer felt allowed to say. Today I saw a squirrel on the balcony for a long time. Maybe it's waiting for someone to speak too. I cooked roasted carrots today. My son used to love them. I wonder if he still remembers. I dreamed I was being hugged. When I woke up, I hugged myself and still felt cold. She didn't complain, didn't vent, didn't tell anyone. She just wrote. Because some things, if never said, will start to rot in the heart. If you're hearing this story now, and you're a son, a daughter, a grandchild, or someone who's forgotten to call back, please know. Love when left unspoken starts to feel like absence. Tomorrow, Bon will share what Agnes did next, and why one late phone call might be enough to save someone who feels like they're disappearing from their own life. But for tonight, just remember this. Older people don't fear death. What they fear is living without ever being seen again. The chair. No one sits in. Agnes's living room wasn't big. White painted walls. A few small framed pictures hung slightly crooked because the old tile floor had sunk a bit near the corners. The wooden clock on the wall, a birthday gift from her husband when she turned 42, still ticked, though its hands moved like a breath fading at the end of the day. The moss-green armchair in the far left corner, once where her husband read the newspaper, was now where she sat. Morning, afternoon, evening. Not because she loved it, but because it was the only thing in the room that hadn't changed. When her son was young, that chair was the heart of their home. Dad in the seat, Agnes and their son sitting on the carpet, children laughing, fingers grabbing popcorn, TV on but no one really watching. Now her son had a 4K TV, a massage recliner, back-to-back Zoom meetings all week, and she still sat in the same chair with memories no one asked about anymore. Once a cousin's child came to visit and pointed at the chair. "Why don't you get a new one, Grandma? It's old." Agnes smiled. "Because this is the last thing that remembers our family used to sit together. Sometimes it's not the object that's old. It's the memory inside it that no one bothers to remember. And people, no matter how long they live, are really just walking archives waiting for someone to open the covers." That night, after the 27-second phone call, Agnes didn't cry. She just stayed in the chair a little longer. In her hands, a hand-embroidered cloth her son had given her years ago. Its edges frayed, the color faded, but the stitched message was still there. "To the best mom in the world." She stared at it, not to read it, but as if she were asking, "When did I stop being the best mom in the world?" The next morning, she didn't wake up early like she usually did. No breakfast for two, no table to set, no tea poured. Just herself sitting in the chair watching sunlight fill the room like an uninvited guest. She turned on the TV, same old channel, morning news. The anchor spoke of war, inflation, politics. No one mentioned the older women who had stopped calling their children. There was no headline for hearts slowly giving up. In all the noise outside, Agnes was a sigh no one heard, a breath no one responded to, and she began to believe maybe her existence, like the old chair, was only valuable in memory. By afternoon, she made tea. 2 cups, one for her, one across the table. She didn't drink, she just looked at it, as if waiting for someone to lift the other cup and ask, "Mom, is there something you wanted to tell me?" No one came. Just the slow ticking of the wooden clock counting down, and unspoken loneliness. If a person is no longer needed and no one remembers them, do they still exist in anyone's life? She stood, stepped out into the yard. The sun had dropped low, light poured across her shoulders. A stray cat walked by, paused, looked at her. It didn't approach, just stared as if 2 quiet creatures saw each other but didn't know how to begin. Agnes sat on the stone bench her husband once patched with old concrete. The lavender beside it still bloomed, still gave off a faint scent when the wind blew just right. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Is there anyone out there who still needs an old woman?" "No one needs anymore." The wind didn't answer, but Bon, who will arrive in the next chapter, was already listening. The mother, the woman, the name that disappeared. There was something Agnes had never told anyone, not because she was ashamed, but because she hadn't realized it herself. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped having a name. When she was young, she was Agnes, the most beautiful girl in her literature class. Then she became the wife of George, a brave Navy man. Then the mother of Thomas, the mother of Jane, the mother of Samuel. Later, Grandma, the one who made the best chicken soup in town. Every season of her life, she was given a new name. But now, in other people's calendars, who was she? She opened her phone, checked her contact info. Her own name wasn't listed. In other people's phones, she existed as Old Mom Agnes, Old House, Call for Papers, or just a number, no name. She remembered once her son said to his wife, "My mom has nothing to do these days except wait around." It was a harmless sentence, truthful even, but it cut not like a blade, more like a whisper that leaks tears at night. Bon once said, "There's nothing more painful than being someone's everything and slowly becoming someone they only remember when they need something." Agnes walked into the bathroom, stared at herself in the mirror. White hair, wrinkles by her eyes, dark spots on her cheeks. All of it said one thing: I have lived. But no one seemed to remember what she once brought into the world. She tried to smile, the same smile her husband once called the softest weapon in the world. But now no one reflected it back. The smile faded, just like her name. One night, half asleep, she heard someone whisper, "Agnes." She jolted up, looked around. No one. She wept, not from fear, but because it had been so long since someone called her name like she still existed. Old memories flickered like slow film. Children crying, "Mom." Little voices shouting, "Mom, help me." Simple questions like, "Have you eaten? Are you feeling okay?" Now they were just soundless echoes slipping through fragmented dreams. She began a new list, not things to do, but something else. A list of names I've lost. Mom, the one who kept the fire going, the one who always asked how you were, the one you used to call 5 times a day, the one you hugged from behind, the one you kissed on the forehead every Sunday night. She closed the notebook, sat still, then whispered, "Who am I? If no one calls me by the names I gave everything to become." The next day she walked to the nearby park. A group of teens played basketball. A couple pushed a baby stroller. An old man tossed breadcrumbs to sparrows. No one noticed her, no one called out, no one needed her. And in that moment Agnes understood. Her name wasn't on a birth certificate. Her name lived in how others remembered her. And now, no one remembered. The wind blew, leaves scattered. One fell gently into her palm. Dry, light, fragile. Just like her. Just like every older person who isn't hated but simply no longer mentioned. Bon once said, "Some people die twice. Once when the heart stops beating, and once when no one calls their name again." And in that moment Agnes knew she was still alive, but her name had already been forgotten in the hearts of the people who once called her everything. The missed call, and tears no one saw. Saturday night, light rain. The sound of droplets tapping gently on the roof like an old heart beating slower than it used to. Agnes sat in the kitchen. The warm yellow light cast a long shadow of her body against the wall. The kitchen was familiar, but tonight it felt twice as big because she had been sitting there alone for far too long. In front of her was a black landline phone, placed neatly. It hadn't rung in days. She thought about calling. Her hand trembled slightly. Her eyes fixed on the digital screen, the name already dialed, Thomas. Son. Her finger hovered over the call button. Just one press. That's all it would take to hear his voice. But her heart pounded, not from hope, but fear. Fear that it would be another 27 seconds, or worse, no one would answer. She didn't call. She just stared. And then, a single tear fell onto the call button. She wiped it away quickly, not out of shame, but because crying without anyone there to witness made it feel unnecessary. Outside, the rain grew heavier, but inside a different storm. A storm inside someone who used to be the shelter for an entire family. The moment she placed the phone down and decided not to call, outside the window a figure approached. A gray umbrella, tall frame, slow, careful steps, shoes slightly muddy from the wet ground. Agnes squinted. The figure stopped at her gate. Didn't knock, didn't rush, just stood there as if he knew the person inside needed presence more than words. It was Bon. Not a doctor, not a reporter, not a relative. Bon had come to listen. No promise of healing, no answers, just presence. The kind that understands some hearts begin to mend simply by being seen. Agnes didn't ask, "Who are you?" She just smiled like someone who had been waiting a very long time for someone to show up without needing an invitation. Bon didn't speak right away. He took off his raincoat, sat across from her, placed a warm teacup on the table, the one she always set out, though no one ever used it. Silence. 10 minutes, no words. Just the tick of the old kitchen clock. Then Agnes spoke. "I was about to call. I really was. I was afraid. If I get rejected one more time, I might not try again." Bon didn't react, just nodded, as if he was holding back every judgment, every opinion, every reason just to leave listening in the room. "Do you know what it feels like to call someone and realize they don't actually want to hear you?" Bon looked her in the eyes and said, "I think that's when you start to question whether your voice still has any worth at all." Agnes was quiet, then let out a small laugh. Wet, tired. Exactly, that's exactly it. They sat there. No solutions, no advice, no conclusions. Just a moment shared between someone on the verge of giving up and someone who still believed that the right presence at the right time can soften even the pain that's been silent for too long. Before leaving, Bon reached for the landline, gently dialed the number, handed her the receiver. She hesitated, hands shaking. Bon said, "Not so he can hear, but so you can hear yourself say what you've been carrying for too long." She held the phone. It rang. No answer. Voicemail clicked on. "Hi, it's Thomas. Can't talk right now. Leave a message." Agnes paused, then spoke. "Son, I'm not calling to remind you of anything. I'm just calling because I'm still here." She hung up, exhaled, leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes. And in that small house, for the first time in years, a mother who no longer waited for a reply found the courage to speak her truth anyway. Bond listens to her for the very first time. That day, there was no rain, no sun, just a soft gray sky, enough to make someone feel smutty in a world that no longer seemed to rush. Bond returned. He brought nothing but a pen and a blank notebook. Agnes was sitting on the porch, same chair as yesterday. Beside her, a cup of tea, cold now. She looked up and nodded gently. "You're the first one to come here without asking what's wrong." Bond sat down quietly. No questions, no interruptions. After a long while, she spoke. "Do you know who I used to be?" Bond didn't answer. She smiled softly, as if asking herself more than anyone else. "I used to be the woman whose 3 kids couldn't fall asleep without my lullabies. I used to get 3 calls a day from the man who loved me just to ask what I felt like eating. I was the one neighbors came to for recipes, for advice, for help watching their kids." She looked out toward the fence. "Now I'm the one they only remember when the washing machine breaks or when they need help signing insurance papers." Bond wrote, didn't say a word. The sound of pen on paper was softer than comfort, and somehow more comforting. One night I woke up suddenly. I could have sworn someone had called out, "Mom." I jumped out of bed, ran into the living room. No one was there. I thought it was a dream. But no, it wasn't a dream. It was just a memory that came back too clearly. She paused. "You ever had that, a memory so strong it feels more real than the people right in front of you?" Bond nodded. She kept going. "I thought if I stayed quiet, maybe they'd notice. Maybe they'd ask. So I stayed quiet, but no one asked. And that's when I realized I wasn't being quiet to be heard. I was quiet because no one was listening anymore." Bond asked gently, "Were you ever angry?" She stared out. "No, I was sad. Sad that I taught my kids to be strong. Not to cry, not to complain, not to need anything. I was so good at teaching them to live without me that they forgot I was still human." A long silence. Bond wrote one line. "Some mothers are lost not when they die, but when they're no longer needed." Agnes nodded slowly. "Exactly. I used to be the light in the room. Now I'm the nightlight someone forgot to turn off." Bond set the notebook down. For the first time, he looked her in the eyes and asked, "What do you want more than anything right now?" She paused, a long time, then whispered, "I want to hear someone say, 'Mom, I miss you.' Not because of what you do, just because you're my mom." A droplet landed in her palm. No one could tell if it was rain or a tear. Bond didn't ask again. He just stayed for another hour. No words. Because sometimes you don't need someone to answer. You just need someone to stay long enough to listen. As Bond stood to leave, Agnes looked at him and said, "Thank you for letting me tell it. I didn't need a solution. I just needed to hear my name again." Bond smiled, turned back. "See you again, Agnes." And for the first time in a very long while, she heard her name, not from a document, not from a form, but from someone who still believed that a name is a piece of the soul spoken aloud. The loneliness of those who don't need to die to be gone. Agnes woke up at 5 a.m. No alarm, no one calling her name, just habit. Her body had learned not to wait for reminders because she knew no one needed her to be on time anymore. She sat up. The room was dim, no sound. Some people wake up with hope, with plans, with calendar alerts. Agnes woke up just to not be consumed by the silence. She moved slowly into the kitchen, made herself a cup of tea, whispered, "Good morning." Not for anyone else, but just to make sure her voice didn't die quietly inside her own throat. Then she sat, still, as if waiting for time to pass, as if she were a clock with dead batteries still hung on the wall because it looked nice. Bond arrived, unannounced, like a soft beam of light stepping into a room that had forgotten it still needed to be lit. Agnes smiled, not brightly, just enough to say, "Today someone sees that I'm still alive." Bond sat down, placed a new notebook on the table, opened to the first page. A single quiet question. Have you ever felt like you disappeared while still alive? Agnes didn't speak right away. Then she chuckled. You know, I didn't need to die to feel like I wasn't here anymore. That feeling came soft as a shadow. No one killed me. They just stopped seeing me. Silence settled over them like a funeral with no mourners. Bon wrote down every word, slowly, carefully. Not for record keeping, but out of respect for a voice that once meant the world to someone. Agnes continued. The day I gave birth to my first child, the whole world spun around me. People called, they visited, they asked. I was mom. I was the woman who brought a new world into the world. But then I got older, and that world moved on. Bon didn't interrupt, didn't offer comfort. He simply asked, do you still feel like you belong? Anywhere. A pause. Then she said, I used to think I belonged to my family, then to my memories. Now, I just want to belong to myself, even if it's only a little. Bon handed her a slip of paper. On it was one sentence. The last thing I want to hold on to before disappearing completely is... Agnes picked up the pen. Her handwriting was no longer graceful, but her words were blood and memory and soul. To be remembered, without needing to remind anyone. Bon felt that sentence etch itself into his chest. To be remembered without having to ask that is the purest form of love. Agnes looked up. Her eyes were red but dry. I don't blame my children. They've grown up. They have lives of their own. I just wish the world understood that some deaths happen quietly. No funeral, no casket. Just one more time being forgotten. Bon squeezed her hand. He didn't say, I understand. Because how do you understand a pain that has no name? He just stayed, just listened, just bore witness to a truth that was too often overlooked. You don't need to die to disappear. Sometimes all it takes is being forgotten. The first time she wrote for herself, Agnes had never kept a journal. Her whole life she wrote for others, schedules for her children, grocery lists for her husband, recipe notes for the neighbors. Even birthday cards, she often wrote the message inside for someone else to send. But never, not once, had she written for herself. That afternoon, the sun came out. After days of overcast skies, it returned like an old friend, knocking gently at the window with its soft light. Bon walked in holding a brown leather notebook. On the cover, a single sentence was printed in quiet italics. Write not to remember, but to see yourself again. Agnes took the notebook, ran her fingers across the cover. It wasn't new, but it was soft, like a hug she had never received. Bon didn't say much. He set a pen beside it and stepped out of the room, leaving her alone with something unfamiliar, the right to finally say what she had never dared to say. She opened to the first page. She began to write, slow, halting, as if each line was a step onto a frozen memory just beginning to thaw. Dear Agnes, it's been a long time since anyone called you with gentleness. You used to be the first one awake in the house. You always ate last. You remembered every vegetable your children liked. But you also skipped the trip because your son had a fever. You gave up art school because your husband needed help at the store. You never bought that dress because your daughter needed one for prom. And you did all of this without ever complaining. Today, I write to you to say thank you. No one ever said it, but I know. No one would be here today if not for how quietly you disappeared. She set the pen down, looked out the window. No tears, just a long, deep breath. As if for the first time in decades, she had just met someone she hadn't seen in a long, long time. Herself. The next day, she wrote again. 1 page, 2, 10. No recipient, no one to read it, no social media, no praise. Just her heart listening to its own voice for once. On 1 page, she wrote, the sky is beautiful today. I drank tea alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I wrote, I saw, I existed. And if I disappear tomorrow, I'll know I once lived fully in this very notebook. Bon returned. He saw the journal open on the table. He didn't ask, didn't read. He simply looked at Agnes and smiled. You look lighter than you did yesterday. She smiled back gently. I think writing for myself is the first way to see myself without judgment. Writing is the quietest kind of act, but sometimes it's stronger than any words spoken aloud. Because it doesn't need a response. It just needs someone brave enough to face themselves. That evening, Agnes wrote a single short sentence. Today I was with me. And for the first time in a very long while, she no longer felt left behind. Healing isn't a demand. It's touching your own heart again. Sunday morning, Agnes didn't make 2 cups of tea today, just 1. But this time she placed it right in front of herself. Dead center. Not tilted toward the empty chair across the table. Not saved for anyone else. Because for the first time in years, she chose to stay with herself. She wore the teal blue sweater, the one her husband once said, "That color makes you look like a laughing lavender branch." She looked in the mirror, smiled gently. Today I dress for me. Bon arrived, sat in the usual chair. No need for invitation, no need to ask. Agnes handed him a page from her newest notebook. I used to hope someone would apologize to me for forgetting me, for being careless, for turning me invisible. But now, I don't need an apology. I just need to forgive myself for letting sadness stay too long. Bon paused, stilled. That's a big thing to say, he whispered. Agnes nodded. I used to think healing was when someone returned, held me, said they were sorry. Now I know some wounds aren't meant to be fixed by others. We have to learn to live with them, without blaming them anymore. Bon set the notebook down, looked at her. Do you still think you've lost your worth? She looked up. No, I used to, but now I see. I can still cook a good meal. I still remember poems. I can still smell cinnamon in the oven. I still write. I still listen. I can still love a stray cat in my garden and feel my heart soften. And that's enough. Worth doesn't live in whether others need me. It lives in whether I can live kindly. Bon wrote one line. No one can take your worth from you unless you hand it over first. That afternoon, Agnes walked to the park. In her hands, a small basket. Inside, soft bread, a few apple slices, and a pouch of dried tea. She placed the basket on the bench, sat down, and kept writing. A little girl passed by with her mother. They paused, hesitated. Agnes smiled. Would you like a slice of apple? The girl nodded. Agnes handed it to her, not too much, not too eagerly, just like someone who had given all her life and now knew how to give without needing anything in return. The mother nodded in thanks. They moved on. Agnes turned back to her journal, wrote, turns out I still have something left to offer. The evening settled. Golden light spilled across her face, wrinkled like riverbeds in a desert that had just known rain. Bon arrived, didn't speak, just placed a hand on her shoulder. No advice, no comforting words, just presence. And in that moment, no one apologized. No one needed to fix anything. There was only one woman who had learned to hold herself again, when there was no one else left to do it for her. Because healing isn't waiting for someone else to make us whole. It's learning to be gentle enough to stop judging the heart that's still beating inside us. To be needed again, even just once more. That day, Agnes received a phone call, not from Thomas, her son, but from Emily, her granddaughter, 15 years old, living more than 300 miles away. Her voice rang clear over the line. Grandma, I found the notebook you gave me back when I was in kindergarten. Agnes paused. What notebook, sweetheart? The strawberry cake recipe book, remember the one with the butterfly on the cover? You wrote on the first page for Emily when you're old enough to bake on your own. Agnes froze. Her throat tightened. Her hands began to tremble, not from age, but because too many memories had just rushed in at once. Yes, darling, I remember. Emily's voice softened. Dad said you've been feeling a little down. I'm sorry I haven't called much. Neither has he. But today I thought if I don't call now, maybe by the time I want to hear your voice, there won't be anyone left to call. Agnes didn't reply, just cried. For the first time, she allowed herself to weep, while someone she loved was still on the other end of the line, and she didn't feel ashamed for being soft. Emily continued, Grandma, I'm off school this weekend. Can I come stay with you for a few days? Agnes didn't hesitate. Of course, sweetheart, I'll be waiting. That weekend, for the first time in nearly 9 years, her front door opened for a family member. Not because they needed anything, but simply because of love. Emily arrived. She hugged Agnes tightly, said nothing, It was the kind of hug that only someone growing up can offer someone who once carried them through the world. That evening, they cooked together. Agnes taught Emily how to cut carrots properly, how to season salt with her hands. No measuring spoons needed, you just feel it. Emily laughed. Dad never taught me like this. Agnes smiled softly. Your dad wasn't the best cook, but he used to love in small ways. Maybe he's just forgotten, but I'm not angry. That night, Emily found the box of unsent letters. She didn't say anything, just took one and left a small note. Grandma, your writing is beautiful, but maybe now you don't have to write alone. The next morning, Emily woke early. She found Agnes at the table writing, but this time not writing for the lonely version of herself. This time she was writing as the woman filled with hope. Today my granddaughter came home. She brought nothing but a hug, and I realized some connections never die. They just need to be reached for one more time. That afternoon, Agnes made chicken soup. Emily said it was delicious. Agnes picked up her phone, snapped a photo, and sent it to Thomas with just one line. Your daughter is learning this recipe now just like the old days. 1 minute later, a message came back. Thanks, Mom. No long explanation, no apology, just one sentence. And it was enough for a mother to know she still existed somewhere in her child's heart. That evening, Emily curled up next to her grandmother and said, Grandma, I want you to teach me how to journal. I think I have things I want to keep too. Agnes smiled. Start by writing for yourself. That's how I found me again. And in that moment, the woman who once believed she was a burden had become the one to open a new door for the next generation. A generation learning how to love on time. No one is invisible if they dare to light themselves again. Monday, 7 a.m. Agnes woke up earlier than usual. Not because something needed doing, not because someone had called. She simply wanted to watch the sunrise, fully, for the first time in many, many years. The kitchen glowed in soft morning light. The old kettle whistled steam rising like a memory not yet forgotten. The scent of herbal tea filled the air gentle like a quiet gift from an old friend. Agnes brewed a cup. Not to save, not to offer, not for anyone else. Just for herself. To enjoy as something she was finally allowed to receive. Bon arrived, no notebook, no pen. Just a single question. Are you still writing? Agnes smiled. No, I'm living. And each day lived honestly as its own kind of journal. Bon sat beside her and saw her not as she used to be. Still the silver hair, still the eyes dimmed by age, still the laugh lines softened by time. But now, everything seemed to glow from within. She told him, yesterday I took Emily to the market. Someone called me the cheerful grandma, and I realized I don't need them to remember Agnes. I just need them to feel that I'm here, and that my being here is real. Bon nodded. You've gone farther than anyone in your family knows. You didn't just survive, you chose to come back. That afternoon, Agnes went to the garden. She cut a few stems of lavender, walked over to the new neighbor, an elderly man who had sat alone in the shade for months. No invitation, no occasion, just this. Hello, I live next door. I just wanted you to know you are not invisible. The man looked up, his voice cracked. Thank you, I thought, at this age we're just waiting to go. Agnes replied gently, no, at this age we're finally learning how to live without needing anyone to watch. Bon wrote the moment down as if it were scripture, a quiet gospel from those who are growing old. The elderly don't need to be mentioned. They just need to know their presence still brings light. That evening, Emily read through Agnes's journal. She slipped a small note between the pages. You're the first person who's taught me how to live with myself. You are not invisible, Grandma. You are the reason this whole house is learning to see again. The next day, Thomas, her son, sent an email. Mom, I'd like to visit this weekend. No reason, just, I miss you. And I think this time I'd like to listen more. Agnes didn't reply right away. She just wrote one more line in her journal. No one is invisible if they are brave enough to relight the flame inside them, even if it's just a flicker. And in that small house once filled with silence, there now lived a quiet hum, the softest kind of energy. Not loud, not glowing, but enough to remind us. Some people don't need to be loud to be lovable. They just need to be seen one more time at the right moment.